Yeah, he's got the potential to be first overall. I know Eddie Jones, who writes with us at Draft Analyst, he just did his top 10 for the OHL, and he had Clark number 1 and McTavish number 2. There's a lot of kids, though. There's a lot of kids. Not just, I mean, the WHL has got kids. What about Dylan Gunther? You know, what about Carson Lambos? I mean, the kid Sillinger, Mike Sillinger's kid is fan. He's a great prospect, though. My goodness, he's physical. He's just skilled. I'm not lying when I say that it's wide open. It's probably gonna come down to stats and international tournaments. And you know what? If people want to complain about that, go ahead and complain, because I'm admitting right here it's a public show. You can tell everybody that Steve Kournianos, the draft analyst, has no idea what the 2021 draft is going to look like until much later on.
I will say this, I always like the way you put together like each team you've done so far. I like when you talked about like why you wouldn't have Lucas Raymond going ahead of Holtz, because he was not good away from the puck or strong on the puck. But I always like, when you go in depth on a player like that, that always gives me hope, when the other big media markets, I don't want to say the names of the sources. I read them, but they make it a little too rosy. But I like to get that grit, and you bring that grit in the scouting depth that I like.
Yeah, man. Listen, man, when I went to journalism school, right? I wasn't all that good. But one thing that I did, remember from journalism school was that I had a teacher, and he told me, like, when you write a story, you have to write it like you're telling a story to someone that you stop on the street and they ask you a question, and like they have no idea. So if I'm walking down the street and you're walking up to me and we're friends, and you say like, "Hey, what's up, Steve?" I'm like, "Hey, what's up, Joe?" And I'm like, "Hey, did you see the game last night?" I'm like, "No, I didn't see it. What happened?" That's how you write a recap. You say, "Oh man, Holtz was freaking dominant. I mean, like, he delivered like huge body checks and he was all over the ice." And now you're not going to get that from a box score. You're not going to get that from a stat. You know what I'm saying? So the more I do this, the more I realize that the teams, when they draft, they don't care what we think. They don't care what we rank. They don't care they care about how that kid fits into their system, how that kid will fit into their culture, their organization. And that goes way beyond stats and scoring. Like, you're going to have to be able to distinguish yourself in a lot of areas. Sometimes teams take risks, but, it always goes back to what I've always said, that when it came to draft coverage in the NHL, it was never like the NFL, where the NFL guys and the NBA guys, they could tell us everything. There's an old commercial. Now, I'm in my 40s, so I don't know if you guys remember it.
I'm 31.
Okay. There was an old EA Sports MLB commercial, right? Mm-hmm. And it was an old, gray-haired scout, and he's sitting in like the seats of a game, and he's scouting a guy, and like 4 or 5 young guys are sitting next to him, and they're like, "Oh, who's this?" They're like, "Oh, this is like so and so. He's like the greatest scout ever." And he's basically like looking at players on the team. He's like, "That's Joe Johnson. He's got a dog named Sucks. He sleeps on the left side of the bed." Like, basically, like he's a scout who knows everything. And then so one of the guys is like, "Whatever, big deal." And so the scout goes, he's like, "You pick your nose and eat it, and you were a bedwetter." And the guy is quiet. And this was an EA Sports commercial. It was like on national TV. So, but basically the point is that those scouts were able to always tell us everything we wanted to know about these kids. And, the mainstream is very difficult to get that, especially on draft day. Draft day, we never got anything about a lot of these kids. So and I'm not the only one doing this. A lot of guys are doing it, and they're doing a great job. I think now is the best time ever for hockey fan. If you're a prospect, the news is outstanding, whether it's the pay sites or it's the free blogs, the free podcasts. I mean, you name it. Think about it. Like, we just gave in-depth analysis on freaking 6th and 7th round picks. This was not available back in, let's say, 1995, or unless you were tapped into the industry. So right. I just try to help. I got the time to do it, so why not just do it?
Yeah, one of the things, I will give Montreal fans big credit on this. When I caught eye of Jan Mysak during the World Junior, he really made me think of him as a really well-rounded player, and I was surprised he fell that deep in the draft. And I find that, he was well coached under Patrick Aliash, and having him play with Pitlick and those other Czechs, they look really good against the Russians. And playing against a high tier team like that, I can't stop thinking about how great that series was for them. And that World Junior was probably most competitive, with Canada winning gold.
Yeah, that Group B was the murder group. I mean, you got freaking Russia, Canada, United States, Germany, and the host nation, the Czechs, in the same group. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I really did. As far as Mishak goes, listen, he split the season between the Extraliga, and then after the World Juniors, he went and joined the OHL. He did not have a very good Ivan Holinka, right? So the Ivan Holinka is in August. It's in the Czech Republic, so he's basically playing it on his home turf. And he didn't have a tournament that you would consider worthy of a potential top 5 or top 10 pick. And that's what we thought Mishak was, based on his production for Litvinov as a 16-year-old the season prior, in an adult league. And the Extra League is physical. It's not like I don't want to knock Finland or Sweden, but the Extra Liga is a more physical league. And that game, it seems to be, I'm surprised more Czech kids aren't drafted, because that league, it seems like it mirrors the NHL style more and the AHL style more than the other European leagues. But in any event, so he didn't have a good World Junior, and then Central Scouting came out and they gave him a freaking C rating, which was like, yeah, like we were all like, dude, all right, do you know something that we don't? Because now you're giving a kid who was outpacing Nachas and Zadina in terms of production as a pre-draft kid, and now you're giving him a freaking C rating. A C rating is like a 5th or 7th round pick. And I had Mishak. I think I had him like 11th overall in my preseason ranking. And so with Litvinov, they could not score. They were one of the worst teams in the league. Everything was always a struggle, but I never got the sense that he wasn't playing well. And I know some people that had ties to the organization were DMing me, and they're like, he needs to do more. He's not. I'm like, what do you mean he needs to do more, though? He's a young kid. He's only 17 years old. And it's kind of a tough situation to be in. So whether it was, for whatever reason, I think that played into the Central Scouting ranking. And then they eased up and they gave him the B grade, and then he goes to the OHL and he tears it up. But I mean, listen, if you looked at the OHL numbers, they could be a little skewed because he didn't play the whole season there. Some games he was outstanding and dominant, and other games he was kind of just like invisible. But he's a two-way type. He could be physical. He's got an excellent shot. He's a playmaker. He's offensive-minded when he needs to be. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, yeah, great value pick. I had him as a late first rounder. And where did he go? I forgot where he went. Did he go in the second or third round?
Let me check.
I'm not didn't mean to put you on the spot. I think.
No, I like being put on the spot. I like the pressure.
Yeah, Montreal had him at 48. So yeah, they had all those second round picks and they took him at 48. So that was about 16 to 17 spots lower than I expected him to go. And I really thought that one of the teams with the 3 first round picks, specifically maybe, Ottawa, the Devils, but the Devils obviously in Ottawa opted for the North American kid, Ridley Gregg to Ottawa and Mercer to, but I thought, for the Devils, I was looking at Misak and Gunler, the high profile kids that, hey, listen, if they have issues with coaches or they have issues with work ethic on ice, off ice, whatever, still, sometimes these kids, they need that little kick in the tush to get them going. Or when you draft them high, you say, hey, listen, you owe us. We were going to let you drop. But it's not like the NFL where they lose money or anything like that. Like, it's the lower you go, the less money you get. But yeah, I agree with you. Mishak was a very good pick for them. And he could play center. He could play wing, versatile. And we'll just have to wait and see, how long it takes for him to crack that lineup.
Off note for a bit, speaking about the NFL for a sec, I hope Daniel Jones didn't lose a lot of money after he fell after that 80-yard run last night, whatever that was.
Dude, I turned the game off. I don't know why I did. I turned the game off when they scored that touchdown and they were up 11. I turned it off. I'm like, all right, they're going to win 2 in a row and be first place in the division. I've that's happened to me before, but I'm not a first round pick in the NFL. I played football for years in the parks here in New York, and sometimes you just lose steam and you fall. But to happen on a nationally televised game Thursday night, And listen, the Giants are a mess. They're a mess. But he's not bad. He's got promise, Jones.
No.
You got give him a line, right? Give the kid a freaking offensive line.
Yeah.
And maybe he won't have to. I mean, but still, even any quarterback who runs 80 yards, you look at the box, you're like, oh my God, 80-yard run for a quarterback. Eli Manning never ran more than like 10 yards or 6 yards. So,
Yeah, I know. Well, I know, Joe, I know it's a hockey podcast, but you know what? We can talk football.
I was watching a little bit of the Giants-Eagles game, and apparently Vin Curry's from my town of Neptune Township, New Jersey.
okay.
But he went to play at a big prep school in Ohio, but he got that big ball that he just killed the Giants' lifeline yesterday. But it's usually in sports, it's always about the effort. And, you know, sometimes you just don't, you know, handle the art of war seriously. And I find, you know, the art of war does occur a lot in the NHL, and the way that teams are, you know, build their staff and they try and teach their players how to obey that book.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, speaking there for football for a sec, that exactly what you said is exactly, you know, my team has never had a lot of success. They look like they're headed in the right direction. They look like they might be okay. They had the last 2 weeks kind of looked rough, but it's basically what it's like for me living like an hour from Toronto, being a Buffalo Bills fan, is that now, finally, they look like they might be coming good. It's just they're like, but they've changed that whole culture there. Their coach and everything's changed the whole culture, and you know, they're finally look like they're starting to become something. But it's all going to depend on that guy under center. So, but yeah.
Well, I mean, also, and the Patriots finally not being the Patriots anymore. Like they're about to lose their third in a row. I mean, I don't know what the Patriots. You know, they are not the Patriots anymore. So,
no. And every football fan loves that.
Yeah. So now, and so that made for the first time the division is wide open. I always felt the Bills were the only team capable of checking them, even when the Jets had their weird little runs on the Rex Ryan. I still thought that the Bills, because of the you know, the way that the defense played, and Brady never seemed to have good games when he went into Buffalo. That they were able to intimidate him, but just Belichick is a genius, and so sometimes, you know. But yeah, Bills, they're a weird team because they can look great, but I think they've lost 2 in a row, haven't they?
Yeah, they got blown out by Tennessee, and then they were in the game the other day with Kansas City, and then that kid missed the field goal, and then
yeah. So, but again, a long season. Listen. You'd rather be 4-2 or whatever they are than 2-4 or 2-5. So, you know, long season, and they're in the mix, right? I mean, so you just have to. If it's not going to happen this year with the Patriots, it's probably going to happen next year. Like, you know, it's amazing how important Brady was to that team. We always said he's a system quarterback, but Cam Newton ain't Tom Brady. You know, they look terrible.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like when you were talking earlier about like the Capitals and you know, the Penguins. You know, when they lose their great players, you know, their standing stocks would go.
And you said the same thing about the Flyers too. Like the Flyers, like they got Voracek and Giroux, but Claude Giroux's not getting any younger. James Van Riem's like not that good of a player anymore. Like,
yeah, but they got the goalie. They got the goalie. They got the defense. The thing about the Flyers is they've drafted really well. Not as well as they should have considering all their picks, but at a minimum they have that core, right? They got Hart, they got Provorov, they got, you know, Farabee, they got Konechny, they got Morgan. The Flyers will be fine. I'm not saying they'll be like an elite team forever, but then this was clearly a team that relied a lot on their veterans in this playoff run, Couturier, Voracek, Giroux. But Pittsburgh and Washington, you know, Washington's only been building up their defense in the draft the last 4 or 5 years. Pittsburgh hasn't really been building anything because any time they draft a good kid, they trade the kid away. You know, it seems like they have nothing left now in the pool. And, you know, I mean, listen, their top 6 right now is probably the best in the NHL. I mean, they got Kapanen, they got what's his name, Zucker, they got Rust, they have Gensel, and they got Crosby and Malkin. That's freaking deadly. But you know, there's a lot more to that. The defense was terrible, the goaltending was terrible. They had to make changes there, and we'll see. But yeah, that Metro is going to shift. That Columbus you can never sleep on because the defense and the goaltending.
Carolina drafted amazing, and they're just going to be dangerous here because their defense is just solid.
Yeah,
Carolina, Columbus,
Yeah.
It's going to be New York Islanders, Rangers, Devils, like
Yeah, it's
right
going to be
there eventually